Hey, what's up guys, it's Oakley, and we'll be reenacting Hoplite Warfare through the lens of Totally Accurate Battle Simulator. So if you don't know, this is a game on Steam, early access for the time being, where the premise is you place down different units on a grid on both sides, and this is just sandbox mode, but when you press play, these units will be dropped down into a virtual battlefield and they will fight for your viewing pleasure. So I decided to take this early access game and turn it towards a historical premise. And so what I wanted to do is explore Hoplite Warfare, or Phalanx Warfare. And early on in history, a lot of different people around the world were fighting in loose order formation, but started to find that, hey, you know, psychologically, I want to stay with my buddies, and when we stay together and we fight as a unit, we end up being pretty powerful. And so this first scenario is just going to be showing what happens when a community learns to use disciplined, dense, Hoplite Phalanx Warfare and fights a looser community of neighbors here, the blue guys versus the red guys. And so what ends up happening is, well, it should be relatively obvious. The more disciplined force is going to win out. Now, in this simulation, what ends up being shown is that they kind of just bowl over their opponents. Now, in reality, battles wouldn't necessarily have been going this quickly. There is some hesitancy psychologically, but there is something to be said about this simulation here, showing how a dense formation can form up, push together as a unit, can overcome the enemy. Watch from the overhead here. The loose order troops pushing up, some of their forces who are in the front, presumably champions or other units, watch as they charge the shield wall and just get bashed to the side. They're held up by one guy while the ally, his friend, is able to knock him out. A lot of double teaming going on, and then finally watch here as the smaller dense formation is able to rebuff a huge density of loose order troops and just push them out of the way. So the key to the shield wall, the hoplite formation, the phalanx, would have been its staying power. Often battles in antiquity were won or lost depending on who could just stick it out in the battle. Most of the casualties would have actually taken place after the battle turned to flight. Take a look here on the left, the dense formation there, locking shields, pushing forward. That is the power of a shield wall. Watch as they absorb the enemy charge and just push them out of the way. So I really loved seeing some of these historical features actually prove out in battle, and watch as this unit bowls over the enemy. So historically, a lot of different communities and different powers would have discovered the shield wall. Like I said, there's different names for it. In Greece, this would have been paired with the hoplite. You have phalanx warfare, but also barbarians use this. The Germanic kingdoms, the Romans ended up adopting it and using it. So yeah, it's pretty prevalent. A lot of the battles here, I wanted to show you just kind of the chaos of the battle. It makes you think just how sloppy these battles would have been in the end. Look at all those corpses. But a properly disciplined force would not have broken, and so it wouldn't be suffering such casualties. Like I said, most of the casualties would be taking place once the turn to flight happened. Otherwise, it would have been about 5% losses. So, if one community decides to adopt the hoplite, the shield wall, the phalanx, and ends up winning, well then the other community is equally going to try and adopt a similar fighting style, and so what you ended up getting in history is hoplite versus hoplite battles. Now, we don't really know how these took place. In the past, people thought that there was an othismos, basically a reference to a big pushing stage of the fight where the entire formation just, smashed shields and tried to push each other out of the way, just, a shoving match. Our current understanding of this is kind of showing that it wasn't necessarily a pushing match, but more a match of sustaining, and the deeper formations were less likely to rout. Nonetheless, a deeper formation is definitely going to be more powerful than a thinner one, so this simulation here just goes to show kind of the physics of what happens if one of the communities, again, ups the ante and decides to have a deeper formation. Well, as you can see here, it's able to just kind of muscle the enemy out of the way. Now, as I said, historically, you wouldn't necessarily have been muscling the enemy directly, but kind of through a longer, determined battle, you had more sustain and more staying power. So the natural answer to this is, well, for the other community to also form a deep formation and start fighting. Now, historically, there was a lot of this going on as different communities tried to, test out different hoplite formations. It ended up being that you wanted to have a formation that was 4 times as wide as it was deep. Also, something that happened really just awesomely in the simulation is look at the main crush as it happens, but then keep an eye on either flank. The right flank of the red force and the blue force starts to pivot around, and it ends up causing this twirling action, a turning of the flank. This was really awesome for me to see in battle because this is something that we saw historically. It's referred to kind of as the right-hand drift, and the reason for this is because on the approach, psychologically men started to kind of shift to the right, seek shelter behind the shield of their ally, and so battle lines started to shift to the right. It ended up being that the most honorable position on most of these battles, especially in Greece, was to be on the right-hand flank, and so the right-hand flank of either side would be not only shifting more to the right, but also have more powerful troops. And so what results is kind of a battle where the key fight is for the right-hand flank. And that's where most of the crush would have happened. And so what I'm doing in this simulation is kind of just putting it a little bit deeper to represent what happens when you put more elite troops and more emphasis on a right-hand push. And so again, you see a crush in the center, but then finally a slow turn. And so what ended up happening in these engagements is whoever could kind of break through the right-hand side first would be the winner. The part of the battle where the enemy broke and shattered, as I said, is where you can get the most damage done to the enemy army. And the actual turning to flight of the enemy was known as the trope, or the trope. I believe it's pronounced trope. Anyways, that was what they called the turning to flight. And so what would happen is they would kind of mark that area of the battlefield and commemorate it by piling on, weapons and armor. And the trope, the turning to flight, seizing victory through that part of the battle, is where we get trophy. Anyways, I wanted to call out, the idea of the hard right flank. Well, how do you counter that? Well, the Battle of Leuctra here featured the Spartans on the left versus the Thebans on the right. And what the Thebans did is to counteract the Spartan right-hand push, what they decided to do is form a very, very deep formation, 50 men deep, sacred band on their left flank to try and counteract the Spartan push. And so this is one way you could try and counter the natural right-hand tendency. Meanwhile, the Thebans on the right kind of staggered their formation such that the maybe they were in fewer numbers there, but they would delay the action, hold out until the Theban left could presumably defeat the Spartan right. So overhead you can see the engagement taking place and watch as the simulation happens. Look at that Theban band push through the elite Spartans on this engagement. You even see the Theban far right starts to envelop the Spartans, and so this is kind of sort of what happened historically, but it was really exciting for me to see this happen in the simulation itself, all kind of the historical pieces coming together. Now, of course, the battle here is not very accurate. Like I said, the pushing isn't accurate. These guys aren't actually armed with spears. So although there are some inaccuracies of this, there are some kernels of truth that come out of the simulation. So this was very exciting for me to play with, and I definitely recommend you guys check it out. I will link it below where you can apply to get access to the early alpha, but, reenact some historical stuff or just mess around. It's fun for either experience. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this look into battle simulations, the Hoplite, Warfare, Phalanx, and all that. Hope you guys enjoyed. Stay tuned for more and check out my documentaries. See you in the next one. Peace out.